So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about grading. I mentioned that I would maybe record a short video about that. And there are a couple things that I thought I would pass on about grading that might be of interest to you. One is to think about the reasons why we grade. Sometimes people criticize the very active grading by saying that the whole purpose is to sort students and to rank them and to compete them. I've never met anyone who really wants to do that. I've certainly never met a teacher who thinks that that's the primary reason for grading, or a principal. Yes, do we take the grades and the data and make some judgments, and do we create some rank orders and try to determine whether a student has the prerequisite knowledge to move forward to the next grade or the next concept? So as far as ranking and sorting, yeah, these students are ready, these students are not, but that seems to be a legitimate educational purpose. Do we want to know how our students compare to national norms, for example? We think we're doing a good job. Are we doing a good job? How do our children read compared to other children in this country, compared to what is expected? If the only judgment standard is the classroom teacher, then I can assure you that your standard will be different from mine, that will be different from somebody else's. So there needs to be some kind of benchmark somewhere that thoughtful people have come together, considered what makes for good reading at various grade levels, and have set a standard. And we can then compare to that standard and say, yes, our kids are or are not reading at an appropriate level given their abilities and their grade level. So it's not a bad thing to be assessing students. That's how we get information about whether they're ready to move on to the next concept and whether they've mastered what we've taught them. And if they haven't, shouldn't we then go back and reteach it so that they do master it? So assessment is part of the process. Now, assessment's not the same as grading. Assessment is the data that we use that produces a grade, and we usually combine many different data points to construct a grade. So over a 9-week term, we may have 2 or 3 tests, 2 or 3 quizzes, 3 or 4 projects, a paper here or there, a in-class presentation, what have you. So 12 to 15, maybe 2 dozen data points from which we construct typically an average or weighted average that says overall this is how this student is performing. Now, who needs that? If the teacher already has the data about reading levels and mastery levels, why do we need to combine these into a grade? Well, primarily because parents want to know. Parents really don't need to know all the technicalities of standard deviations and how this student compares on a percentile basis to those across the country, except to know that, is my child on track? Are they learning what they're supposed to be learning? Should I be concerned as a parent about how my child is progressing in school? So we need to let parents know in some way, in some fashion, whether their children are doing all right. That's a huge part of it. And that's probably the primary reason for grades. Students also want to know, but they have a pretty good sense of how they're doing. They've gotten their marks back. But pulling it all together, getting an average helps to get a sense of, am I doing okay? Is this what's expected of me? Do I need to work harder? Do we need to do something differently? What should we be doing for this child to help them be more successful? So that's really the point of a grade. And you can have numbers, percentages, you can have letters, you can have arrows that show a range that on any given day this child may perform at this level down to this level, and you put a little point on it somewhere which shows the average. There's lots of different ways we can do this. But to be honest with you, what parents really want to know is, compared to typical kids at this age, is my child all right? Are they doing okay? In other words, everyone in the back of their mind operates from a normal curve setting. My child is average, my child is below average, my child is above average. Is my child in the ballpark? Whether they're above or below average, are they in the ballpark of acceptable and reasonable? And certainly we invest a lot of energy and effort into students who are functioning at a below average level to get them up to average. We want to skew the curve towards the upper end. We don't want to have a normal bell-shaped curve. That's why we invest extra resources, extra time, and diverse strategies into working with children who struggle, so that we can skew that normal curve to the right-hand side of the scale, so that we have very few people that really are not in the ballpark. They're struggling so much they really don't belong in the grade, or they're struggling to keep up, and they will continue to struggle. On the other end, we have the gifted students, and they're at the peak end, and they will do well. They will do well wherever they are. Now, there is a bit of an illusion about grades, which has to do with percentages. And somehow the idea is that if we just raise the percent standard, that will make a difference. So we raise the bar, that will lead to higher performance. But in fact, it does nothing. I've been in British schools, Canadian schools, and American schools throughout my years, and I've been in some of the best school systems in the world, and the percentages really don't make a whole lot of difference, to be honest with you. The very toughest school I ever attended was a British boarding school in Switzerland. An A, top level score in that school, was 75%. The easiest school that I ever attended was in Arlington, Virginia, back in the 1970s, when Arlington, Virginia was the current Fairfax County, Virginia, one of the top school districts in the country. And an A, as I recall, was a 94% in those days. And a fail was 70%. So that sounds like a higher standard. But the reality is that in the British school in Switzerland, to get an A, you had to work exceptionally hard. They simply wouldn't give you 75%. In other words, teachers created assignments and created tests that were designed to sift out the top level students from the not so top level students. In other words, really capable students are going to get an A when they're done. And those who are okay are going to get a B, and the ones in the middle are going to get C, and then there's going to be a few down at the bottom that are going to get a D or an F. In fact, failing was 35%, which sounds pitifully low. But again, the test was designed to create that kind of result. And so where I was in Alberta before I moved to Michigan, an A was 80%. And Alberta has one of the highest education standards in the world. Certainly in Canada, and Canada is one of the highest in the world. But 80% is an A. And so when I would grade an essay in Alberta, I would know that, okay, a really good paper is anywhere between 80 and 90, and an outstanding one is anything in the 90s. It's still an A paper. Bottom line is, if you tell me that the 20% range is the top tier, that stands for excellence, then I'm going to use those numbers to reflect that. And I'm going to design tests so that it reflects excellence at that level. On the other hand, if you move the grades up and say, well, an A is anything from 90 and above, well then we'll create tests that are designed to sift out students so that excellence is in the 90s. So percentages have this illusion of being precise and being very accurate, but in fact they say exactly the same thing that a letter grade does. At the back of every standard, whether it's a teacher standard or a standardized test score, there is a norm somewhere. Somewhere there are a set of students, or is a set of students, that represents what we consider to be normal. These are typical students. That is the middle. That is the 50th percentile. And any student performing above the 50th percentile by definition is above average. Any student below the 50th percentile is below average. Now we don't use percentile standings. That is a true ranking system. We use just straight percents. But we design our tests in such a way that we can say to a student, you are performing well above the expectations for your grade level. This is outstanding work. That's the student that we might give extra projects to, get them to tutor in another class or be a peer tutor. And then there are students who are performing below expectations. They would be below the 50th percentile. We might grade them at, well, if in Switzerland they would get a grade of 35 or 40 or 50. In Arlington, where I was, they would get a grade of 75 or whatever. The percentages really don't give any additional accuracy. What is important is what is the grading curve, the normal curve that's being used behind that. And fundamentally, whether it's numbers, 5 for proficient and 4 for mastery and what have you, or whether it's the traditional A, B, C, D, E, or F, really doesn't matter. The bottom line is there is a level which represents excellence. And there is a level which represents good or very good. And there's a level that represents acceptable or fair or medium. And there's a level that's poor or not very good or needs improvement. And then there's a level that's unacceptable or failing. And regardless of how we disguise it and how we frame it, fundamentally, every score that we look at is keyed back to the good old normal curve. The curve may be skewed one way or the other, but basically everybody has in their mind, and even the standardized tests, there are cut scores designed into them that says this is proficient, this is mastery, this is acceptable. Those are all designed from some sort of norm group out there. So there's a bit of an illusion about percentages and grading. They are useful for reporting. For students, they're helpful as a benchmark to let students know how well they're doing, if they're on track, and particularly high school students are looking to go to university. They want to know whether their standards high enough to get them into the school of their choice, those kinds of things. But we shouldn't have any false illusions about the accuracy of these grades. They are our best take on a judgment about a student's performance compared to other students at that grade level, regardless of whether we say we're comparing or not. We can have a criterion reference test, but that test standard was set based on what we believe a typical student at that grade level, having taken this course, should be able to do. And the value of the criterion is it can stay the same from year to year to year, but fundamentally, at its inception, it has a norm group behind it. And so really every grade, regardless of how we do it, is some kind of comparison. And that's useful to know whether we're working with a student who needs extra resources and extra assistance, and whether we're working with a student that's not going to make it into the college of their choice. There's all kinds of value to those grades when we're done. We just need to understand that they're not as accurate and realistic and as pristine as we might think they are. So I hope you found that thought-provoking and useful.